Do you ever wish you could ditch the rest of your sweater and wear just the sleeves? No? Well, I made the pattern anyway. Leave a comment about what you think about this quasi-bolero garment thing. The working title in my house has been Just the Sleeves, so that's what I'm gonna call it. Just the Sleeves. Whether you think it's cool or weird, I used some interesting techniques in this design to get it seamless and adjustable, so stick around for a very useful and practical tutorial for a garment of questionable practicality. The first part of the pattern is to create this thing. It's actually just a rectangle with a hole in the middle. So I'll start by showing you how to create that hole. I used 2 balls of Bernat Softy Chunky and some 10mm circular needles on a 20-inch cord. This was long enough to carry all my stitches and to work in the round for the sleeves. So I've knit my first 7 rows, and I'll have the numbers for more sizes up on the screen. And I'm going to knit across 9 stitches for the shoulder. Now it's time to bind off in the middle for the neckline. I'm going to do a somewhat stretchy bind off by slipping the first stitch knitwise, and the next stitch, and I'll insert my needle into the front of those stitches. To get my needles positioned like so, to knit those 2 together through the back loop. Again, slip, stick the left needle through the front loops, and knit together. I'll continue until I've bound off 18 stitches and have 9 remaining. And as you can see, this bind off is a little stretchy, more comfortable for pulling over your head. And including my last stitch here on my right needle, I've got 9 left to knit for the other shoulder. So we've got the middle stitches bound off, and on the next row, I'll purl the stitches until I reach the bound off ones. Then I'll show you how to cast those stitches back on to bridge to the other side of our work. I'll grab the working yarn and make a thumbs up like this. Scoop the yarn up with your thumb, and see how you've made a little crisscross loop? Insert your needle under the first loop, slip it off your thumb, and tighten it up. Again, thumbs up, scoop up the yarn, crisscross under the loop, tighten it up. Continue like this to cast on the same number of stitches that you bound off. This is called the backwards loop cast on. Once you've cast back on all those stitches, you can join to the remaining shoulder stitches by simply purling into that next stitch on the left needle. And now we've completed our neck hole. And purl across. All that's left is to knit the back rows, and I'll go ahead and show you how this first row looks after the cast on. So I'll knit up to those newly cast on stitches, and the backwards loop cast on is very loosey-goosey, so don't be alarmed if you have a gap like this. As you knit, those will become less and less noticeable, and it doubles as a good partner for the stretchy bind off that we did earlier. Now you'll knit back and forth until your back piece is about 3 times longer than the front piece. And bind off all the stitches this time. Here, a basic bind off is fine. Then you'll be left with this little thing. I think it's technically called a dicky at this point. And it's time to add the sleeves. And I love picking up stitches to knit in the round so that there isn't any extra seaming to do. To do that, we'll again have to cast on extra stitches in the middle of our work so that we can get the right circumference for our sleeves. But let's start with picking up the stitches that we can, along this edge here. So find the very edge of your work with the right side facing you. And we'll be working into this first space next to the kind of twisty strands of the edge stitches. Insert your needle into that space under the edge stitch, wrap a new yarn and pull it through. Poking into the next space available, wrap counterclockwise, pull up a loop. Insert, counterclockwise, and pull up a loop. Now, I'm going to skip every 4th stitch to prevent our sleeves from being too big. So pick up 3, skip a space, pick up 3, skip a space, and continue all along the short edge of our little shoulder neck dicky thing. And if the pick up 3, skip 1 sequence doesn't match up perfectly at the end, that's totally fine. Simply be sure to pick up a stitch in that very last corner. And using the backwards loop method I showed you earlier, cast on the additional stitches for your size. To begin knitting in the round, simply knit into that first stitch that you picked up, and now it's easy. You can knit around and around until your sleeve measures 29 inches from the center point of your neck hole. Lastly, we'll decrease stitches and work the cuff. See how the cuff is cinched up tight here? That's because I reduced my stitch count by half before working the cuff ribbing. So to do that, you'll need to knit 2 stitches together at the same time. See how I knit into the front legs of both those stitches? Turning 2 stitches into 1. Do that for every 2 stitches of the sleeve to cinch up your cuff. Here I had 3 stitches left over, so I knit 2 together and left that last one. As long as you have an even number of stitches remaining for the knit 1, purl 1 rib. To do the ribbing, knit 1, purl 1, and repeat. Knit 1, purl 1 all the way around. And at this point, it will get pretty tight up on your needles since we're working a smaller number of stitches now. You can switch to double pointed needles, or what I like to do is kind of a mini magic loop. Split the stitches in half, Pull the cord out the back, and then holding all your stitches in place, pull out your right needle only. Now it's free to knit a much smaller circumference. And when you knit all the stitches off your left needle, you can kind of reorient yourself again into the same position, with all the stitches in a small circle and the right needle free. Knit for 6 or 7 rounds, or as many as you'd like, and then bind off. Binding off in pattern is stretchy enough for these sleeves, which means a basic bind off where you knit the knits and purl the purls before passing the previous stitch over. To give these sleeves a really polished look, I added a turtleneck to the neck opening. You're a pro at picking up stitches by now, so let's do it again. All along the bind off and cast on edges of our little neck hole. Here you can pick up in every stitch because our stitches are running the same direction this time. At the corners where your cast on meets your bind off, it's a little unclear where to work into. You can try a couple spots and see if it produces any gaps. And I tried to work under these little wraps on the cast-on side. And again, at this corner, I just picked up a spot that I thought worked. And any accidental gaps can be sewn up with a little bit of extra yarn at the end. So I've met my first stitch, and again, it's time to knit in the round. For 7 inches this time, about 20 rounds. You'll definitely want to do a stretchy bind off here, since this part goes over your head. And that's it! Just the sleeves! Let me know what you think of this garment idea. Trendy? Practical? Weird? Let me know. I think it's a much cooler version of the little boleros we used to wear in school to follow dress code. Either way, I hope you learned some fun techniques that you can apply to your next project. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!